Hello there, everybody. Merry Christmas. It is Christmas Eve 2017, and I thought I would take this opportunity to read to you. In Yoakum's Compendium of Bizarre and Original Stories, I got two short stories about Santa Claus, so I'm going to read you one of them. It's a short story, only about 4 or 5 pages, so I'm going to go ahead and read it. It's called Santa's Adventure. Santa awoke in a daze. Looking into his surroundings, he slowly began to remember what had happened. He was tied to a chair, his red suit dirty and torn. His hat lay on the ground before him with a gray liquid splattered all over it. Blood. Elf blood. Memory slowly but surely seeped into his brain. His elves were working diligently as they do every day in the North Pole. Santa sat in his office smoking a blunt while going over the list. It was a typical December 19th, about a week before Christmas, as it had been every December 19th for the last several centuries. Being immortal sure was groovy and nifty. Santa shook his head to clear it. He was starting to go off tangent a little bit with his line of thought. He had to focus on the now. As he sat in his office, he heard such a clatter. He rose out of his chair to see what the hell was going on. His reindeer were walking on their hind legs and wearing suits. Nice suits. They were finely tailored like Armani. Rudolph appeared to be in the lead. He wore a gray trench coat over his suit and held a baseball bat. He was threatening to beat down one of the elves. Santa opened his bottom drawer and pulled out one of his one-hand crossbows. It was an Asgardian weapon given to him by Odin himself as a birthday present when he turned the big 200. That was 200 years old in the New English. It was an enchanted crossbow that never had to be reloaded. Asgardian weapons were truly the best. Santa sat quietly, and he crawled over along the floor, clearly in great shape for a fat man, and sought out a clear shot at Rudolph. Just as he took aim, he was grabbed by Dasher. "Right, Santa. Old Dolph out there's special plan for you." Dasher grabbed the crossbow and threw it at Donner. "Here you go, old chum, a gift from me to you." Santa looked around the workshop. All the elves were rounded up and locked in the elf barracks. Dancer and Cupid guarding the doors to ensure no one got out. The windows were locked from the outside, making that way out of escape as impossible. Sorry, I'm not a really good reader out loud. For no elf is physically strong enough to break that glass. Mrs. Claus was on Santa's workshop laptop, hacking into the Federal Reserve Bank online. Was she working with them? "Lord Rudolph," Mrs. Claus called out. "I got in. There are several firewalls, but I can easily bust through them. Fucking amateurs." Rudolph smiled and threw her a cookie. "Well done." "Dasher, tie the fat man to the chair." Dasher roughly pushed Santa onto the chair and locked him down with an Asgardian bicycle chain, said to be unbreakable by mortal means. Compared to the Asgardians, Santa was merely a long-lived human. He likely lacked that ability to bust out of the chains. A stray elf who was hiding under a workbench decided to make a break for it, his jaw meeting with Rudolph's bat, gray blood splattering Santa's hat that lay there on the floor. Santa cried out and yelled several cable-worthy obscenities at Rudolph and shot a dirty look at his wife. Mrs. Claus gazed over at Santa. "Don't friggin' look at me like that, Chris. You haven't made me feel like a woman in over 300 years. Rudolph can make me feel 100 again, so sod off." She turned back to her work, and Santa blacked out. Now that his memories were caught up in his mind, he had to think of a way to get out of this bike chain. Taking a deep breath, he sucked in his gut and exhaled, causing his gut to expand out again, snapping the chain. Never underestimate the power of a motivated fat man. A piece of the chain flew off and hit Dasher in the head, knocking him to the ground. Mrs. Claus jumped up from her seat, pulling an Uzi out of her belt. Before she could raise the weapon up, Santa flew through the air Matrix style and roundhouse kicked her to the temple, putting her on the ground hard. All of the commotion had summoned the rest of the reindeer, except for Dancer and Cupid, both of whom were now laying on the ground being pummeled by the elves who decided to bum rush the two evil reindeer. Santa lay some ninja-style moves down as he mowed through the crowd of reindeer, magic arrows flying along with his fists and feet. Santa then stood triumphant amidst the vile creatures and his traitorous wife who tried to take over the North Pole, rob the Federal Reserve Bank with his computer, and no doubt frame him for the act, totally ruining Christmas for all. Angelina Jolie came out from the other room, dressed in a red and green lingerie. "Oh, Kris Kringle, you marvelous man, you saved us all." The elves were cheering and singing, "Kris, savior of the Christmas time. He saved every one of us." Angelina kissed Santa and began to slowly drop down to her knees before him. Santa's eyes shot open as he lay on the table, several technicians surrounding him, bringing him out of the artificially induced fantasy. "So, Santa, how did you like your virtual vacation?" The end. And that, to me, is a Christmas story. Well, I hope you all have a Merry Christmas, and stay tuned for more updates on my blog.